In the not too distant future, humanity is totally boned, allegedly. As Iron Lung takes place, it's just as likely a few portions of the population just shifted into an alternate dimensional plane, and what is known as the Quiet Rapture takes place. Every man, woman, youngling, plant, animal, planet, or star would all simultaneously disappear into the darkness. Well, ours anyhow. Any stars still left out there that appeared to be in the distance are actually no longer there, and instead were just so far away that their light is still reaching us as it traveled millions, if not billions of years to get to us. As some humans are left clinging to the ships that they were on, a moon, apparently, covered in blood is discovered. In its depths lies what is allegedly the salvation for humanity tasked with surviving in this unfamiliar existence. But several questions remain. What exactly would be the biology of these creatures? What does this mean for humanity? And why is the blood not just a medium in which to live, but also a living entity itself? Well, let's discuss all that today as we cover the movie Iron Lung. Also, before getting into it, you should probably go watch this movie. It was actually a lot of fun, and it's ball maneuver, I suppose. Moving on.
The stars are gone.
All the stars are gone, the planets are gone, your girlfriend is gone. Wait, no, she never existed. Basically, bad news bears here, called the Quiet Rapture. Not enough resources, not enough people to restart, which is actually a lie. There's probably enough people to restart, had we not started a war. But anyways, the moons have resources that we can grab, and one moon stands apart from the rest. And within that ocean of blood, surely it couldn't all be blood. It's all blood. As we descend into an iron lung, a man then sits there in a high polygon chamber. As lights flicker on, they begin their descent into the blood moon. They are a convict being sent below, deep below. The convict actually sort of looks like Markiplier.
Was that the bite of 87?
Asking if it's been tested, the iron lung can take pressure, but not too much. So you don't want to get ocean gated. He is there and is allegedly told that he's just the first one down there, but the person sent down prior was never found. They literally contradict themselves within the first second. Anyways, but there also wasn't a scratch on the vessel. As they immediately enter the red, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch is given control of the helm. Godspeed, brother. Looking through the vessel, he finds instructions along with a map. Hearing a rattling noise outside of the ship, that cannot be good. Space anglerfish or spanglerfish, equally horrible regardless. Finding a button, the screen on his left then turns on as he begins looking around. Continuing to mark the map, classic, he begins his search for whatever fresh hell awaits, which it's the depths of a blood ocean on an alien moon. Surely nothing bad lives down there. Taking pictures of the areas mapped, he gets notifications about oxygen. It appears to have decreased by 1, or as we in the business like to say, 25%. Didn't want to get too technical there. Turning on the camera, he then looks out and spots something gross that needs to be destroyed probably. Looks like a mass of tendrils. Walking back to the helm, so to speak, I guess, he cleans off the map and continues looking through the coordinates in which to head to. Turning on the camera once more, he finds bones, indicating that this is in fact an ecosystem of sorts. As the water keeps dropping, Bro is sweating like a whore on Judgment Day, although it appears as though Judgment Day already happened. Calling out, he asks what he's even supposed to be doing there, as he's not finding anything on the map. The water continues leaking in, and it's now red, as it's also getting quite hot in there. Well, it's blood, which I guess it's new blood, so 98.6 degrees I would have to assume? Maybe. So, as some drips on his hand, yeah, it's blood alright. Taking off from the area, he begins hearing noises around the vessel. Turning on the camera once more, he sees something with what appears to be eyes and massive teeth. Bit of an unknown at this point, however, as then the vessel starts to shift, as clearly something is outside of it, just beyond the thinnish walls of metal, as something big begins swimming around, causing him to fall. Alright, so absolute nightmare situation we got going on here. So here were my options. I could either A, get on the controls, pilot myself out of there, ascending to the surface, escaping certain death, or B, roll around on the ground, have whatever is out there implode the ship, and die. As pressure increases, the radio signals finally make it through, and then it asks him if he fell, as then he yells at her about how they didn't know anybody else was down there. He tells them he's done, as then he kind of just decides it's over for him, as then she keeps asking if there's a problem with the hull. Looking around, the sub is fine. Mentioning settling, apparently at the bottom of this blood ocean, it's nothing but congealed blood and gas bubbles. Tasty. Actually, you know what? Speaking of tasty, that brings us to today's sponsor. But first episode sponsored by Factor. Currently, I'm on a cut. And you know what that number one issue has been that I faced? Variety. Man was not meant to live on boiled chicken and plain white rice alone. And because of this, what has been absolutely fantastic concerning meeting macros and losing fat while getting a ridiculous amount of protein has been Factor. I personally go for the double protein option because I'm trying to go for like Giga Chad status, or at least Clayton Carmine at minimum, but maybe that's not your thing. With their options such as keto, vegan and veggie, calorie smart, protein plus, breakfast, green shakes, whatever you're looking for, Factor has it. And with summer upon us, You're probably sitting there thinking, well, dang, I probably should have actually listened to Roanoke back in February, but it's not too late. The average body holds about 5 to 8 pounds of water weight. Correcting your diet now and eating healthier, you can actually begin the process of shedding that water weight to look your best. I know this because I'm literally doing this right now, because apparently the leap from winter to summer wasn't supposed to happen as fast as it did in my brain. So just 2 minutes in the microwave and boom, I have a delicious, ready-to-eat meal that is perfect for my goals. So if you're thinking along the same lines as I do, then you can head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code RoanokeFB50 to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code RoanokeFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. So he reports it was a skeleton that he saw. They immediately go to pull him up out of the depths with that information because apparently that's somewhat useful. Hearing something around the vessel still, they begin bringing him up as he asks, well, now what? As the door opens, distant people can be heard talking, as then he's asked about his oxygen levels. He's informed the water on the walls is just condensation, don't worry about it, as they don't really let him out of his cage. Mentioning something about the council, they downloaded the picture as it just looks like a skeleton. He's been welded into the iron lung though, so it's kind of hard to get him out, as then he tells her there is something else. He says it's really not worth the deal though. He mentions something is alive down there, as she says it might just be. Okay. So they're going to attach a spear to the front of the vessel so they can capture whatever is alive down there, or at least a sample of it. She tells him to just do his job, as apparently they are welching on the original deal. Smacking the camera, he then X-ray blasts everyone as their bodies begin to degrade, as apparently it is extremely high levels. Surely that won't be a problem. I'm assuming that the camera operates in the 1,000 millisieverts, which means it would induce acute radiation syndromes in them. Something to note, millisieverts are basically based on biological damage. But you know what? Actually, I'm going to talk about this for a second. Acute radiation syndrome, or ARS, is essentially when radiation hits your cells, and it does one of two things. Actually, it does several things. Either it results in direct radiation damage or indirect radiation damage. Some of you have probably heard me talk about this, but essentially your genetic structure is held together by what is basically a sugar phosphate backbone. That's literally what makes your body, your cells, all of your genetic information, that's you. It's incredibly fragile, and honestly, it's a miracle life even came up with it at all. Anyhow, when we get hit with radiation, there are alpha particles, beta particles, X-rays, gamma rays, all the classics. And when radiation passes through a cell, it actually heat up the cytoplasm, which then destabilizes the actual genome through heat absorption, given that the cell is not supposed to be that warm. On top of that, this can also cause proteins to denature and misshapen and disrupt cellular activity. The X-ray photons will also hit water molecules as well, causing free radicals to break free and begin damaging the cell. Now, the other form is known as direct radiation. When the X-rays strike the genome, electrons will also strike the backbone and break it, causing what are known as double-stranded breaks, or basically nucleotide deletions, just a whole host of issues. Now, the cell does have the ability to fix this breakage through things like DNA polymerase and ligase, which actually joins the ends of the DNA backbone, but if the DNA is just totally shredded, which is very likely, it will then cause the cell to either enter apoptosis, which then explodes, or it will become cancerous. It's really hard to say how powerful the X-rays on the iron lung actually are, but to look through that much blood to see creatures several feet away, you're talking about millions of millisieverts, which of biological damage, induced in just that second. So yeah, everyone in there who had their image taken is probably completely screwed at this point. So dropping him several feet, he then lands on the surface of the blood ocean, as then he hits the bottom of the sub. They then ask if he's still alive, and it was fair play, as they just all got blasted with X-rays. They then tell him he needs to close the porthole as he begins descending, and then closing it, they say he has about 30 minutes to acquire whatever he needs and then bring it back up. They appear to not be too jazzed about being X-rayed, which, I mean, it's too late to do anything about it right now. You could be like the one scientist who is screwing with the demon core with a screwdriver, and he's like, well, that's it, after he just got blasted with radiation. So asking if he's being blasted by radiation too, they say, nah, don't worry. the thing that we just threw together should totally keep you safe. Marky then sees something in the back of the sub, surely not radiation breaking down his brain, and then grabbing something, he goes to clear the sub, but there really is no room for anyone down there. It's just you, big dog, you're good. So finding a box, he opens it, seeing that there is something hidden in there. Grabbing it, it appears to be some piece of glass with a note attached. Reading it, it says to cross the wires. Always a good idea. Crossing them, Operation Cannot Possibly Fail is engaged. Fallout comes up on the screen as the voice says, it's not an expedition, it's an execution. Even if you return, what life really awaits you? I mean, pretty much, yeah. I don't think the human race is doing too hot at this point, and it looks like everybody's fighting over virtually no resources, so you're probably done within one generation anyways. A few ships amongst a bunch of dying stars is really not that wonderful. It goes on to say that they will stay at the bottom of the ocean instead. This individual did. Marky says, well, I want to live, basically completely disregarding that crackpot's ideas. Probably good, as he continues to look around. Really, they could just be in a cosmic void. There's an idea related to this, and we'll talk about it here in a bit, but it's horrifying as well as interesting. Actually, you know what? I'm lying to you. I'm going to talk about it right now. Basically, giant soap bubbles on an intergalactic scale. But Roanoke, what Prometheus of nonsense do you bring us today? Well, given that there are massive voids of blackness in the universe, what's interesting is because of gravity, they're actually forming superclusters of galaxies that form these strings, so to speak. Not everything is distributed equally within the universe, and because of this, voids have begun opening up, and it's almost like the outside of a soap bubble. Inside is the void, on the outside is the void, and on that layer of soap, like to create the bubble itself, is just the layering of galaxies. But as gravity works, eventually these bubbles pop, and when it does, the galaxies all move towards one another, allowing two supervoids to connect, forming a megavoid. Now, if this is the case, how do we know this isn't what took place in the actual event? Also, don't know if you heard that noise. It was a giant bird next to the window. Humans disappearing is a bit strange. Clearly, there is some type of old god situation going on here, but concerning the blackness of space just appearing, it seems like potentially then this was the case. Maybe humanity found ourselves in a mega void. And what's creepy about them is you can actually look in any direction if you're in one, and you will not see light. Still doesn't explain the disappearance of the sun, but it may help to explain the backdrop of there being no light. Of course, now you have me on a completely separate side tangent, so an idea actually came up in this game when the ship gets hit that you're no longer anywhere near the coordinates you were initially, which is like, oh, well that's cool, Roanoke, the thing hit your ship. But I'm not convinced. See, to go to like some of these areas, you actually have to phase through walls that weren't really, or that were there, so you can't just do that. So then how do you do it? Well, given the universe is in motion, if you were to say time travel, it's really not like you hit a button and then go back 3 weeks and are still on Earth. If you separate yourself from time, you're also separating yourself from gravity, and you're separating yourself from basically being attached to anything. So you're not attached. Everything is independent of you at that point. Earth goes back 3 weeks because the solar system is not even in this area yet. Now, maybe. Let me do some math. Okay, math confirms I'm wrong. You would be about 32 million miles away from where you are supposed to be in the Lord's based units, and in the heathenistic metric that one guy in Kazakhstan still uses, that's 51.4 kilometers. So in being hit and phasing, are you essentially portaling or are you being time warped? I almost believe it's a time warp issue and that humanity is experiencing this issue. But we'll kind of get there when we discuss some of the theories on all of this. So continuing his search, he looks through the manual, finding something to use at its own risk, which is always good. Taking more pictures, the hull continues to condensate, and hearing something, he then calls out to them as the radio talks about retrieving the sample. He then asks what's going on, as he says the skeleton from earlier has moved. They then ask how that could even be possible. It's just bone. He's at the coordinates, but there is no spooky, scary skeletons. Asking for his location, he says it's just more hills, and then moving up, he calls out as they can hear him now as he continues to report, again, the skeleton has moved. Heading up further, he's still at 75% oxygen, as then he asks, why is it so hot? Well, the outside is warm. Ditching the outer clothing, he keeps ascending as he says he didn't mean for that to happen. The X-ray event, that is. He then asks how bad it is as she says, well, it doesn't matter. Well, it might matter here in a couple of weeks. So she keeps informing him that he was the first one sent down, which then he asks, why do you keep lying about this? It's like, dude, stop lying. So she crashes out saying there are not enough of them to throw away lives, but they need to take calculated risks. She asks if that's why he destroyed Filament Station. Apparently that wasn't supposed to happen. Well, apparently he made a big oopsie doopsie because it did happen, as the oxygen now alerts him he's at 50%. Checking the camera, the skeleton is now near him once again. It has moved. The ocean floor isn't static, as they say, and things keep shifting. He tells her he sees the skeleton, but it's just the head. He apologizes again about the radiation, as she says, well, you can apologize to my tumors, but he needs to get those samples. She then tells him to ram the skeleton and get the sample. Ramming speed. Bro, like brace yourself for something. As he increases speed, he then hits full force and comes to a stop. As he sits, the ship's hull creaks as then he takes a picture. He sees there is a hole in the skeleton's jaw. As he keeps talking about these pictures, they begin their ascent as he says the skeleton was looking right at him. So now they try to bring him back up, but something has got him. He says he needs to cut the line as then he hits his head, and Marky here starts having gamer flashbacks to the stars being dead. Waking back up under a neon button, he calls out, but there is no answer. Hitting the button, the camera screen then flashes as he can see for a moment. Doing it again, he checks himself to make sure that he isn't gravely injured. Looking pretty good, the sub is sparking. Not good. Which mechanically, I guess it does mean it's working. Finding a locker, he then opens it and finds a life jacket. Some very wishful thinking. Looking through it, he then finds water as he drinks and keeps taking pictures. To see. Going to open the floor vent, he then uses scissors to open it up as it's pitch black down there. How much space could there possibly be in this thing? Attempting to find a light source, he then gets the flashlight on as he looks into the underbelly of the vessel, taping the button down, which takes a picture every few seconds to provide some light. Entering the underbelly of the vessel, he begins crawling through to see what is really going on with the small vessel. Finding a black box, that's really all that's down there, and then hearing cranking noises, he looks down at his feet as the camera has stopped taking pictures. Having to crawl out that way, one must ask, why did it stop? Finding some sparks, he then finds the emergency engine restart as he goes to get the ship restarted. Pulling the lever cronk several times, the ship is primed and then begins working once more. Heading back up to the main area, he finds the tape that he put on the button is actually, it fell off, and the porthole has been opened as things begin moving outside of the hull. Hearing a hull breach, the glass then starts breaking as Marky Mark gets sprayed by blood from outside of the ship. As the hull breach repeats over and over again, a fire breaks out next as he's able to get it contained and then gets back down into, the level of it just being a hull breach, which is still pretty bad. Listening to it over and over again is enough to drive anyone insane as then he hits the speaker, causing it to finally stop. Nice way to break your hand, but hey, the system works. Wrapping himself up, Bro is now covered in scratches and bruises. Grabbing the alcohol, tetanus might be a serious concern, and smelling the alcohol, he realizes, I can drink this. He decides to go for the internal injuries over the external ones. Going to the map once more, he then finds on the back of the crossed wires, it was actually torn out of the manual. Tearing out another page, he begins plotting coordinates some more. And as he takes more pictures, he drops the pen as then he sees a whole creature's face is looking at him. He then takes another picture as he sees it just sort of hanging out in the back of the cave as then it goes back into the cave. So yeah, there's definitely things down there. He tells whatever it is to just pretend he's not even there, and then taping the button once more, the light continuously flashes as then it slowly peels off of the button as he has a crash out about it. Using a lot of tape apparently, he is now completely out, and deciding hanging out with the abomination of the cave is maybe not the move. He begins to back out of the system as he starts developing a map of the area, like a cartographer. Continuing to explore this cave system, he ends up finding some fairly strange things down there, and he calls it, what it is pretty much, aliens. Hearing a hole breach some more, he then smacks the speaker off to get it to shut up, and continuing to search out the surrounding area, it becomes rather apparent that there is more than just one thing down there. There are several somethings, whatever they are, and that is the depth of my descriptive prowess because I don't know what these are. As Bro then passes out, he has flashbacks to what I am assuming is Filament Station being engulfed in flames, as one guy is then totally consumed by flames. Alright, so this might be kind of confusing to you, but basically what happened is Earth ended up colonizing Mars, and when we did this, Mars became more populated than Earth. I imagine because of the long-standing dust storms, what else are you going to do but reproduce when you're bored and stuck inside? Eventually a sort of standoffishness between Martians and Earthlings would happen, despite us being the same species, but honestly, does that even really stop us on this rock right now? Eventually everyone would start building massive stations, the Mars one being a little bit larger, and as this progressed, the Quiet Rapture took place. This would leave only humans and a single tree that was on the station that they built really available, and some humans in the Martian stations had it a little bit better, and given everyone could still interbreed, they would kind of somewhat come together, but there was a sort of have and have not mentality, depending on what planet you were initially born on. Fights would break out, and eventually Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch blew up Filament Station, except he may have been framed. He didn't do it purposely. Basically, in the end, humanity had 460 people left, and then we chose to war with each other. Classic. So coming back to, he finds the original submersible that was much better, apparently, that the researchers used, but the hull is breached. He calls out to it as he tries random passwords, and getting shocked by the wire, he smacks the computer, which now apparently works. Looking through their log, over 100 pictures were taken, as then he finds a thing. No idea what it is, and as he does, he hears something behind himself, as then he turns and sees nothing. Finding the creature from earlier in the picture of it, it's oops, all aliens down here apparently. So he went in a giant circle as the screen begins to bleed, which is always a good sign. Flipping through the pictures once more, he then turns his heading, as then he takes pictures pictures of more walls. Looking around some more, there's only really one direction he can actually go, which is directly up. And as he does, he actually starts ascending, but nobody calls out to him as of yet. As he heads up, he determines he's almost there, but he can't reach anybody on the radio. Hearing static, the signal is trying to come through, but there's a lot of blood in the way. The radio then asks if he can hear him, and they ask if he's real and who is he. She asks if he's Ava. She asks then to be helped, and he says she's not on the tow ship, and she says, well, we can work together as we're stuck down here too. He says they're out of range as Mark is on his last 25% of oxygen. She then tells him to control his breathing. You're gonna suffocate. So Mark then asks her to keep talking to him as he's freaking out. Like being trapped in an elevator on a cruise ship, not good times. Ask me how I know. She then mentions how they have to warn everyone. It's dangerous down there. This stuff is the cause of the Quiet Rapture, apparently. The light apparently caused the Quiet Rapture. What is the light? Well, it's like these little light anomaly things that are down there. He had pictures of it earlier. Some say it is a religious rapture, and I assume that these would be, angels, I'm guessing, but they also kind of screw with everything, so it's really hard to say. He then asks her if she found something. She tells him she shouldn't even be talking about that. Bro, you cannot, she goes on, she's like, oh, I found this super crazy thing that's the answer to everything you've ever wanted to know. Oh, you know what? I shouldn't be telling you this. People like this are the worst. So Mark then says it must be the CO2 buildup that's making him go crazy as the woman on the speaker stops talking. Continuing to try to talk to her, she just ignores him. Been there, Haas. Canon event cannot be changed. He then crashes out saying this is impossible, that maybe a few places just went missing, and maybe everybody on the other side of this is wondering where they went. Yeah, maybe. Did you go to the back rooms of Blood Oceans or something? Saying it doesn't matter because there is no CO2 scrubber, the rig is too crappy, I'm going to die. Agreed. The woman then finally starts talking to him again, but how much of that did you hear? That would be my question. My crash out I just had. Did you hear any of that? She then asks if he would give everything to survive. She gives him the coordinates to go in which he's supposed to see something so they can answer this together. He mentions they were still looking for her vessel as well, which she seems surprised. He asks her what it is, and then she asks if he believes in God. She begins speaking gibberish about a God thinking, and that's what we are, and when that God stops thinking, then we aren't. All right. By the way, I don't know. This whole thing talking right now is just... Yeah, anyways, Mark begins talking about how he was blamed for Filament Station. He was trying to stop it from blowing up as she keeps asking what happened to Filament Station. He informs her it's just gone. She appears to be crashing out as then she says maybe he does deserve to see it. He says he didn't blow it up, others did. He was just attempting to stop it. Allegedly. Crashing out further, he begins asking what the point of any of this actually is. Well, I'm going to go ahead and say probably survival. And as he moves, he hears what appears to be a heartbeat. She begins speaking gibberish once more as Marky Mark then takes a picture. He can't find her as her voice begins to change as she realizes the wire to the actual speaker, when he smacked it, was broken off. Also, she said his name, and he never actually mentioned his name, as she was just apparently able to guess it. I mean, there's only 400 people left, maybe she had a manifest. But the voice then starts speaking absolute nonsense once more to him about salvation as a light then rips through the ship as something seems to be moving through. This is a bit strange. It's like phasing through. This is why I think they phase through reality, because this thing is phasing through the ship. Moving past him, he then looks over at it as the creature is moving through, and then it looks at him, and then it says, agreed. All right, big dog. Turning into a complete brother and moon situation, Mark finds himself on the surface of a blood ocean as a creature descends. Looking up, he sees a giant eye in the sky as he is back in the sub throwing up blood. The picture of health. He got all the bad blood out. He should be Gucci now, except, the necromorphs are on the vehicle with them, so that's not good. Going around the corner, he then hears a thing walking up as he goes to confront it, but it's just an empty sub once more. Now, yes, your brain is being absolutely screwed with by an old god. Very good. The radio then crackles back to life as they ask if it's really him. He tells her he broke the radio so she can't be talking to him. She then says she doesn't know how he survived. He starts asking her questions as he realizes the radio is still connected. She asks what's wrong as then he asks for his name. She says, well, we never really got your name actually. Alright, so they sent him down there to die and they didn't even know his name. Very good. It's been days since their last contact. He should have run out of oxygen by now. They're confused how he's even alive. He says he might have died and he doesn't really know where he is right now. He says he thinks he's done enough and that he would really like to not be down here anymore, which that would be my sentiment as well. She says it's not possible to bring him up, as she says he's not responsible for Filament Station. She tells him that they can't risk any more dives right now. They need the data, but it's not worth kind of losing more people. Basically, they're leaving him down there to expire, and their new orders are to hold and observe. How did y'all pull him up last time? just do that again, right? Well, I guess they cut the line. He then asks her if anyone else has ever made it back up, which she says, yeah, they have. He then confronts her about being the first one down there because you told me nobody else was down there. He then informs her about SM8. They are quite interested in how he found SM8, and then he says the computer was actually trying to download the information from the black box on that sub. If they want it, they need to come down and get it. He says he spliced the wires and the computer tried to download the data. She's going to give him the password and then she will come get him personally. Some dude then starts screeching in the background about how Marky Mark is lying, except how would he know about the sub? And giving him the password, he then logs in. He has 30 minutes to get the data, but if he's not at the entrance of the cave system after that, they will leave him behind. She then tells Mark her name is Ava as he gives her his real name, well, his real fake name, Simon. What an absolutely lame name. Statistically speaking, one of my subscribers probably is named Simon. Heading to the ship's last known location, he then takes more pictures for fun, as then he flashes back to more events associated with Filament Station. Someone previously told him to cross the wires, which appears to have caused the issue actually on that station, which then blew it up. As he, marks the coordinates more, he looks further into that cave system. The last tree also died on Filament Station, which is a bad thing. There's no soil that they know of. Apparently their bodies become soil, which is what we know of. And really just a ton of talking in the background when things were not very cash money. Continuing his search, he then takes another picture, and this one is different. Bones around the wreckage as he starts coughing up more blood. Internal bleeding. Having the spot, but not the data, he then goes to connect and download that data, and starting a black box recovery program, it tells him to wait over and over again, which is super annoying. The transfer is incomplete as he has all he needs, allegedly, but his brain case now hurts, probably from being hit in the head several times. Also, the blood and the mucous membrane in your eyes, not a good thing. A log is basically a woman experiencing the same thing that Mark is. As blood then runs down the walls, there's crap continually building up on those walls, which looks like the corruption. The blood is human blood. Blood begins oozing out of the walls, and the speaker, the oxygen in the vessel, begins increasing, probably from being dissolved in the blood, as the answer is apparently right there and they need to see it. Seems like maybe they drowned in the blood as the button has that crap start growing all over it. Grabbing the throttle, he goes to get out of there as whatever is outside the sub is starting to enter the blood. As some then lands on him and then cuts into his skin. Checking his stylish head wound, Bro's beginning to melt, which is not ideal. Hearing Ava call out on the radio, she then tells him whatever he has down there, he needs to keep safe. She then tells him he is the only one that can do this, as the voice in his head begins sowing seeds of doubt. He needs to send the data, as then she tells him it's worth it to send it even if he expires. As she yells, something seemingly happens to her. I think her ship must have imploded. This thing had the ship. Makes sense. And it's talking to Marky Mark right now. Mark begins yelling back as he hits the throttle and then runs into the creature, as then it starts yelling at him because he just ran into him. Entering Goo Lagoon on the bottom of the vessel, he tough mudder crawls through that crap with the pace of a lethargic toddler, as then he grabs the black box. Attempting to rip it from the wires, he is able to escape the rising blood at least for a moment. Looking like Delta Squad after they cut their way out of the giant worm. Now what? As the vessel shakes, he attaches the black box to the life vest, and then running into assumedly a wall, that crap is growing on the wall and begins making its money moves, attaching to him. Pulling himself off the wall, which looks incredibly painful, the thing in the blood keeps yelling at him about finding him, as Mark then tears off his own arm, pulling away. His distinguished streaming career, no! Grabbing the life vest, Bro ain't looking so good at this point, as the voices keep telling him not to run as they call out to him. He says it's more than him, as then he tells him this is what they want him to do. Running back into something, he then asks what he did, and then he now has changed everything. This thing is talking very vaguely. This is why also, again, I believe it's changed everything, which means there was like a set time path that they're supposed to be on, and by doing this, somehow he's now deleted that future, and then starts trying to break the ship apart. As it keeps bleeding, it then says, "We are salvation and we are hope." Never trust anything that says that. Marky is then pulled into the blood as the ship explodes, blowing up the creature that was currently attempting to snack on it, a spangler fish. Blowing its teeth out and taking it out, we can only be grateful that there is one less problem in the world and that thing is gone. And thus concludes Iron Lung, except not really, because then that thing, the black box, floats to the surface and there's a flashlight on it, so then they find it. Not sure what information they're going to get from that, but hey, when in Rome, I guess. Go watch the original if you haven't. Hello and welcome to the science portion, or at least what's supposed to be the science portion, because in reality, how do you science this? Well, there are some possibilities, I suppose, but I have to warn you before jumping into this, much like my Dead Space 3 video, speculating that it never happened, which you should definitely go watch that. There's going to be a lot of speculation based on context clues that I have seen and what we are hearing when Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch enters the Blood Ocean, because there are several things that appear to be happening, which is quite interesting actually, as it could potentially herald in, well, I originally had written two possibilities, but the several possibilities here. We are either at the beginning or we are at the end. But even that end is what appears to be the beginning of another cycle. So with this, there's going to be one guy who gets in the comments and says I'm pompous because I'm talking about this. So I'm just going to go ahead and beat you to the punch here. Go ahead and suck a fat one, brother. Moving on. So how I want to set this up is let's first begin where this all started and attempt to identify any sort of pattern that we really can, because what makes Iron Lung so disturbing is the complete and utter lack of information. And in the presence of no information, the brain will actually start weaving different narratives, like this whole video. However, I do believe there are a few things that can help us sort of make some logical leaps to get to the actual coherent conclusion, but again, it is based on context clues, so if they ever come out with like an actual reason for anything, you're gonna come back to this video and be like, Roanoke, you suck. It could happen, or it could be real. In which case, you gotta say, wait, this actually happened when, believe it or not, this has happened before. So in the original Doom game, I said it actually was the Doom guy, and then something happened to him, and everybody's like, actually, Roanoke, according to the lore, it's completely different. I was like, no, it isn't. And then in Doom Eternal, it comes out that I was 100% correct. Anyways, when the Quiet Rapture happens, I see there are two possibilities. Either it happened to everyone, or it happened to a very small amount of the population. There's really no way to know because the two population groups cannot communicate with each other. However, my instinct on it tells me the smaller population are the ones who actually experienced this issue. Because I mean, think about it. What's easier to do? Remove all the stars, planets, peoples, animals, trees, laundry duties, third-gen forerunners, or abduct a small group of humans who just so happen to be on ships at a particular point in time. To me, I think when Mark makes mention about how maybe the rest of the human race are really looking for them, much like they were looking for the rest of the human race, that is a context clue as to what is actually happening here. And if we can frame it in the right light, rather than an entire universe just suddenly disappearing, then we can begin to actually get a grasp on the situation and its actual effects. Because really, I'm not convinced that these creatures that are in the Blood Ocean are some, insanely powerful creature. They may be interdimensional, but I believe they are just maybe a byproduct of an already existing ecosystem, I guess is the best way to put it, that humanity just isn't aware of. Because it goes back to the question, though, are we at the beginning or are we at the end? So what does that really mean for the human race? And to understand this, we need to understand what is happening temporally, because there are some questions that pop up in a blink and you'll miss it sort of way. Like the devil's in the details. As mentioned, whenever the ship gets hit by these creatures, you actually end up in a completely different location than you originally were, which appears to be, oh, you just got hit. I mean, I guess it could appear like that, but I mean, you aren't just like a few coordinates away. You are functionally what could be comparable to miles away from where you were initially, and this is in an instant. To achieve that, it is basically gonna have you required to be moving instantaneously. Now for this, there are two possibilities. I keep mentioning two possibilities. I know, my brain's working in a dichotomy, but it is what it is. Anyways, I mentioned that in the earlier portion of the video, but the question is, are you being portaled or are you being time traveled? If you're being portaled through, then I guess maybe remaining close to these creatures gives you that ability to essentially portal with them, which would indicate that they are easily interdimensional, and phasing through the reality of our world and into another before popping up somewhere else. However, if time travel itself is used, then this would indicate to me that this species has the ability to stop, reverse, or even advance the flow of time. And if this is the case, then we could potentially flag this as a, kind of falling in line with what we'd expect with what we are seeing. So let's examine the portal option first, because it's not like it has zero merit to it, it just doesn't have as much. Given the sudden rip from space, seemingly, or at least what seems like the ship's perspective, that the space was ripped from it, this would be something as simple as whatever these interdimensional creatures are in this area around the ships, well then they are suddenly taking the ships to another area or dimension. And this does somewhat track because it shows these creatures maybe are not all encompassing and powerful. Instead, they're able just to take a small amount of humans, the ships that they were on, maybe a handful of asteroids and possibly some moons, or if they did portal to a new area of the galaxy, well, then that would kind of explain why everything went missing. But the planets, the stars, the sun, all of this was maybe just way too large for them to successfully portal out of this area and into either another dimension or another area of the galaxy entirely, possibly in a megavoid. And if this is the case, then we really just have an unfortunate situation of what is like an interdimensional predator. Of course, then we need to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of doing this? If the humans are still in the ship and surviving and flying around, acquiring resources from the moons that are nearby that they can actually find, then what are these creatures really accomplishing? And to that end, why do they not take Mercury? I mean, it's the size of a moon. So the biggest issue with the portal idea is it's not exactly the most supported kind of hypothesis. However, the temporal idea, in my mind, holds a lot more merit. This is the one that still operates on a similar mindset that maybe a localized field was opened up where two timelines were the thinnest. Not so much that they were both running side by side, but like let's say you have a creature that knows how to burrow between time frames. Essentially, it's going to be a fourth dimensional creature. And in this fourth dimension, it is hunting. Even the fourth dimension, I guess, the universe is a big place, so eventually it stumbles across humanity, specifically some that are exposed on ships that they have built. In doing so, this fourth dimensional predator opens up a localized spot where the timelines merge. It could be as simple as maybe tracking the ships and then opening up what is essentially a hole to another time and another point in time. As it does this, the ship then passes through, and in an instant, they lose all ability to communicate with other humans. The sun is gone, Earth and Mars are gone, and all they can find is a dead universe with a distant starlight and barren moons. Basically, everything, it would seem like in an instant, everything was quietly raptured. Now, what would this really mean? This is conceptually where the idea of the beginning or the end shows up. We have to ask ourselves, what point in time are we? What is happening in this area? And this idea somewhat relies on the possibilities that time is cyclical and that there really is, there's no beginning and end. It just repeats itself in different ways. And then we'd have to ask, really, what would be the purpose of sticking around for that? But we have things like proton decay, which we assume with our universe, it eventually may result in the actual end, but even past that end, where does the universe go from there? Does time stop just because nothing is there to witness its passage? It's kind of the same argument as like if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? Logically, yes, it still would. And what I find interesting about the idea is that it places humanity as like an innate observer point, I guess you could say, if that makes any sense. Not because you don't understand, but because I'm possibly saying things that might not actually be like sensical. Anyhow, with humanity as the observer, and the most important feature, does the movement of time really matter if nothing is there to observe it? It's like, imagine how much time has already passed before you got here. So many lives witnessed so many things, and now it's your turn to witness what fresh hell awaits us all in this life. So prior to you being here, do you remember any of it? Do you have any concept of how much time has actually passed? Does it really even feel like it's been that long? Billions of years have gone by prior to humanity, and now that we are here, time comparatively appears to be passing very slowly. This is more of just a question for you than really relating to the video. I find the passage of time itself weird, given that we exist in a universe and we are a part of it, yet we have literally zero ability to interact with it at all. Well, apart from aging and dying. Classic prank pulled by the universe, if you ask me. Give us consciousness and make sure it's such a brief time frame, you could almost consider it not even here if you were to look at the data of the universe as like a whole thing. So, at this point, I'm going to be straight with you. I think what we really have here are temporal predators, or at minimum, temporal creatures. I don't believe that the universe is gone and somehow everything around us suddenly disappeared. I believe the observers, being those in the ships, are witnessing what timeline predation is, or even potentially just wrong place at the wrong time. Although, me and the turd in my pocket will explain that. I will explain that here in a second. And although given several ships were pulled in, that seems more intentional than accidental to me. Something chose to do this. It was not random, and it was not just humanity getting swept up in the current of something passing by, like a dinghy getting pulled under a cruise ship. So now we have to kind of think of like what motives come to mind, because that's going to be important to try to understand what is going on here. Why would anything want to pull anyone into this area just for funsies? Well, let's take a look at the area, because again, I think it further supports the idea of a temporal rift and a continuing of interactions. When humans find the blood oceans, we have no idea what we're looking at. Upon further examination, we discover that the bottom of this ocean continually moves. Yes, it's congealed blood and gas, but things there that shouldn't be moving are moving. Ships get moved around through rocks that shouldn't be possible. Animals exist phasing through ships. space, yet somehow it doesn't damage them at all, and they can talk to us saying agreed, which is like, what do we agree to? This level of movement would indicate that time itself is appearing in pockets and changing the environment. Some future, some past, but enough pockets to indicate real change in this environment. So I'm going to stop myself here because when discussing the concepts of time, it always gets a little muddy. Humans are three-dimensional creatures with a vague understanding of it. We know it passes, but we cannot go back, and the only way for us to really time travel currently is to sit here and wait. But we know time itself is affected by things in the universe. Satellites, for instance, have their clocks basically reset every once in a while, and they have to actually account for it because as they travel, they will actually fall out of sync with Earth's time because they are moving through space. If you're near a black hole, time slows down considerably for you, but everybody else, by your observation, it would seem like everybody else is speeding up, and by their observation, it would appear you're slowing down. So this isn't just a timekeeping issue, it's a literal physical mechanism that the universe has built in that the faster you move, or if you're near like a gravity well or something, the more time becomes distorted. Not by just our brains not recognizing it as passing, but by the literal physical decay of atoms. And I think that's the best way to measure it actually. Like let's say you have a proton on Earth, and then you have a proton on a ship traveling near the speed of light. The ship travels back and forth from Alpha Centauri, and then you measure like how much did it decay. Well, if you were to measure that, then the one on Earth would be much further along in its decay than the one that has been traveling. I think it's been said like conceptually that everywhere in the universe is actually only about 10 years from the observer's standpoint on the ship away from us. If you were to travel near the speed of light, then those in the ship would have 10 years pass, but on Earth, hundreds of years may pass, even thousands. I'm no physicist or anything, but it highlights how even though we experience time universally, there really is actually no set time. It's just what we perceive. And because we absolutely know time can be manipulated by the universe, if a species were to manipulate it with their own bodies, this would make them fourth dimensional predators as they could affect the time around them. Locally, this is going to appear absolutely unthinkable to humanity. More so, if we can grasp what actually happened, then it may make it a little bit easier. So we have the hitting of the ship and the sudden loss of everything during the Quiet Rapture, when really the ships were raptured away to somewhere else. The next question is that we're going to need to ask ourselves are, where are we and what actually is the blood ocean? Again, I think this falls in line with the concept that time is potentially cyclical. If we work with that idea in mind, we have stars far away, we have moons nearby, and we have the ships. This being the case, I believe we are still in the area around where the solar system should be. The solar system obviously being our solar system, but we are billions, if not trillions of years in the future. The sun is already long gone. Any planet that existed in this area, again, being like Earth, was either consumed by the sun, or when the sun shed its outer layers, its gravity became weaker, or weak enough that the planets further out were lost, and then they become rogue planets. After some time later, the stars that were close to the solar system also experienced the same thing, and were lost. The Milky Way as we know it is virtually dead at this point, given we are so far into the future, and what we are seeing with the distant stars are the last remnants of it from billions of years ago. Those stars are gone too, but the light given our distance still hits us. All that is left in this barren area of space is going to be just a few moons that we can actually find because they just happen to be nearby. There are other planetary bodies out there, we just don't know where they're at, and they're really hard to find, and they're going to be really far away. And this could also be further supported by the concept of megavoids that I was talking about earlier, like this is real life. As gravity causes galaxies to sort of bunch together, this leaves vast areas where there's actually nothing. If you were to, enter that right now, maybe be like suddenly transported there, you would see no light. It would be the blackest of black that you can think of, and there would be no visual stimuli because there is no light. Because of this, it would appear as though you are completely alone, even though an entire universe exists. It's just really far away from you. If you are this far into the future, then it would be very likely that given the death of the Milky Way, humanity finds themselves either on the edge of this megavoid or in it. So looking at and seeing only photons of long dead stars still hitting their eyes. Very bleak, but what it does show us is that potentially humanity does still exist in another time, just not trillions of years in the future and not in this location, or at least in the form that we think we should be. So now with my crackpot theory established, hopefully you're still here because we still need to talk about the actual blood ocean, because what is that all about? Well, let's say we are at the end, and let's say also time is cyclical. If this is the case, then that means we are actually right before the beginning of essentially a new iteration of the universe. We assume at this current point in time, with our understanding of physics, which, I mean, we aren't batting 1,000 out there with it, but it changes all the time. But as a species, we are pretty sure eventually the universe is going to decay. Not anytime soon, but due to atom decay, it's going to happen at some point. Nothing appears to last forever, but then you have to go back to the beginning. Where did everything come from? Why did it exist in something that is nothing? So if we were wrong about atom decay, or at least the outcome of it, I think at that point we need to go back to the drawing board as far as like physics is concerned. However, we are pretty sure the last thing that we are going to have in the universe are just giant black holes and black dwarfs, basically old washed up stars that have no heat left to give and they don't really put out any light as they slowly fade into the depths of black space. Pretty horrifying when it happens because, well, now what? It's just a dead universe. Pretty weird to kind of think about because even if we are gone, it's pretty much assumed that's what's going to happen. Of course, it's sort of like a dead game, right? Before they shut down the servers, the game is still operational, but the only thing that really gives it any purpose are the players. It may be very human-centric of me to say, but the universe existing without something to experience it just seems like a bit of a waste, doesn't it? I mean, what's the point then? Just chemical and physical reactions repeating themselves on predictable patterns on a scale with no changes until the lights go out. Super boring. Now throw in some hyper-intelligent apes with anxiety disorders who have access to nukes, and that's a universe with some chest hair. With this in mind, that is the purpose, I believe, for the blood ocean, and I meant to talk to you about that. So, well, when Mark actually starts getting eaten by it, we can actually surmise a few things. First, it's acidic, apparently, or at least it's able to break down the body, but we don't really know how. Second, it appears alive. It also appears to be producing heat because he mentions how warm it is down there, and it's also, they test it for genetic information, and it is human blood. So whatever it is, appears to break down materials such as humans that live in it, but it keeps the proteins of the blood alive and the cells are still functional. Also, given what we have seen on the outside of the window that looks like a giant congealed mass of flesh, what is that? Well, this is all speculative at this point, but how do we know humans are not the actual reason for this? What are the odds it's human blood with no explanation? What are the odds, if we are trillions of years in the future, assumedly near to the solar system, that our species, or what's left of it, would be in this area this far gone? If there is anything that can explain this, it's gotta be, it's an extraordinary thing, so it may require an extraordinary explanation. So yes, possibly there is an idea that humanity has struggled with something in particular and will continue to struggle with, and it's our own mortality. We don't like the concept of dying. That sort of thing just isn't our bag, baby. Given all the time that has passed, I don't want this to sound like a cop-out or anything, but can we actually be entirely sure that we didn't do this to ourselves? So let's think about it this way. Individually, we die. We decay and our consciousness is lost forever. However, one day a scientist walks into the room and says, guys, I figured it out. If we just make ourselves into a meat paste, our metabolic activity stabilizes, our genomes face no further degradation, and our brains all link up to form one consciousness. We essentially become immortal. We also know that the universe resets itself every quintillion years based on atomic breakthrough back in the year of our Lord 3657. So if we melt ourselves, we can enter the next iteration of the universe, which then he's immediately stripped of all ability to science. However, as time passes, possibly hundreds of thousands, millions, hundreds of millions of years, and humanity continues up the technological ladder, the effects of an aging universe begin to be seen, and it becomes clear, you know what? Maybe that scientist way back in the day may have had a point. So a technology is developed and all willing participants, which at this point in human evolution, who knows what sort of patterns we may have by then, all agree to be melted down to form this soup as we wait through the eons to basically be reformed. And so the blood moon sits quietly, completely separated from everything else, just sort of vibing out in the universe. Completely just, I guess, alone. Until the events of a temporal predator begin. These could be maybe guardians in the blood that would be formed, and we observe these things, keeping things intact and keeping other species away that may find it. In doing so, when a group of humans get pulled into the future, they find this blood ocean, assuming something horrible has happened, when really it was actually just an example of far-flung human technology on display. And my reasoning for this is why we are at the very end. The blood is not just blood. It's alive. When some actually lands on Mark, it begins breaking down his body. When it enters the ship, it immediately begins mutating and melting him as well, adding him to the blood ocean. The entire time what we are talking about or talking to him is the culmination, Let me try that again. What is talking to him is the culmination of countless human consciousness united due to their connection through this blood ocean. To them, the ocean is the answer to the question that they had to ask at some point. To us, the ocean is a complete horror show because we never had to ask this question in the first place, let alone needed an answer. And so finding this is alarming to say the least. So then, what of the fourth dimensional predators that brought us here in the first place? I think this just depends on, was this intentional or not? Were they just in the area, or was it a trap, or was it something else? Were humans the target, or was something else unseen the target? Given 2 ships were taken from different areas, I would have to assume then humans were the target. It's hard to understand really what they feed on or why they would feed on anything to begin with. I won't lie, it's beyond my ability to rationalize why a fictional creature from a higher dimension would have the motives that they have involving humans. However, that's never stopped me from speculating before. Given what we know about the fourth dimensional predators, or maybe what they are, we know they sought out the ships in order to bring them here, and we know they are moving around in the blood, possibly if those are not guardians built by humans. This seems to me to indicate, do they need humans for something? They never effectively ate the humans they abducted, which if they are predators, then why were the ships free to be you and me and not immediately consumed, which is what you would assume they are? Why were they not destroyed? It seems like they are being guided towards some form of goal. And given the fourth dimensional creatures spurring on at the end, trying to convince Mark not to send up the black box, it seems like they maybe have motives involving the blood itself. So then to that end, are they predators or are they timekeepers? But then why would they need humans at all to mess with the blood ocean in order to timekeep? They're clearly impacted themselves by the blood moon. They're not native, even if they are gross anglerfish creatures with nasty bodies that need to be destroyed. And thankfully, the sub imploding does destroy its body. So remember when Mark was kind of like going around, he's just writing down alien tech crap and seeing all that? I actually don't think it's alien. I think it's human. These were human inventions that may have even started tapping into areas of the universe that were previously a complete unknown to us, or at least unknown to us right now. Because given what we already have been able to do, such as splitting the atom, which go back and talk to a caveman about atoms at all, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? Like on a universal scale, splitting the atom is a pretty big deal. Then in tens of thousands or maybe even hundreds of thousands of years, who's to really say we couldn't start stepping on the toes of interdimensional creatures that we had no idea even existed in order to preserve ourselves? If this is the case, let's regard the abomination in the blood as this fourth dimensional timekeeper. It sees a species using tech that rapidly gets outside of its own control. Because of this, it abducts humans because it knows they will unknowingly travel the area, seeing their own species turned into a blood moon. In doing so, they will find these blood moons, and I believe to some degree there must be a human to maybe unlock human technology, and the fourth dimensional creatures cannot do it, possibly because we built safeguards actually in place because our species became aware of these timekeeping creatures. The creatures had to pick a time and a place where humans had not yet become aware of them, but had the ability to travel in space, and this kind of creates a bit of a paradox. So this means, back on the regular timeline, humanity is actually about to become aware of these things. And do you know why? Because they just abducted a ton of humans from space. It is at this point when humanity collectively realizes there are creatures that we cannot even see and that must be accounted for. Essentially, the predators or timekeepers or whatever they are have to make themselves known in order to attempt to disrupt the blood moons, which means humanity becomes aware of them back in the older timeline, which means we put in countermeasures, meaning the predators have to show themselves in the past again, and so on and so forth, because they created their own problem. Like it's a canon event. It cannot be undone. Their interaction is what spurred us to create the blood moons, but we may have already created the blood moons at this point, like without the temporal interaction, which means by the temporal creatures actually interacting, they're not destroying anything because it was going to happen anyways. It's just our consciousness now becomes aware that they exist. Now, what does this ultimately mean for humanity? Well, I believe it goes back to time being cyclical. Everything has to reset for the universe to be experienced again, because where did anything come from to begin with? Did it come from an older universe collapsing, or was it just already there for infinity? Okay, if it's already there for infinity, why is it now suddenly on a timetable? Because if it was there for infinity, it would still be there for infinity. So this would mean typically a species has to completely be erased and cannot re-enter the new universe through any means. However, humanity figures out how to preserve their genetic information, even consciousness, through the blood moon. The fourth dimensional creatures may be attempting to disrupt this, but cannot access human tech without a human. The answer for the fourth dimensional creatures is down there in the blood moon, which is what they were telling us the whole time. It's not our answer, it's their answer. They cannot disrupt it or stop it, but our species can. So they abduct humans and then transport them to the far-flung future, but in interacting with us, they begin to realize we have no idea what is even happening. And if they were to abduct humans that did, they would know not to help in the first place. So I know I straight up sound like your 5th grade English teacher explaining why the curtains are blue at this point, but it seems like a struggle between self-preservation and between the self-preservation of a 3-dimensional creature trying to and successfully out-juking a 4th-dimensional creature to attempt to get to a possible next iteration of the universe. And even if that's not the case, it doesn't really reset, I guess, if we're still here. It appears as if humanity may have achieved immortality as a blood moon, which may in and of itself maybe piss off a 4th-dimensional creature. Of course, if they truly are 4th dimensional, then they could have just looked into the future and seen this. But then again, the phrase, "you've changed everything," especially when it was saying it very angrily, is actually very telling. Maybe they did look into the future and see this happening and the downfall of humanity. However, with Marky Mark's choices, it in turn completely shifted what was supposed to happen, altering the future, potentially even securing humanity's place in the next iteration of the universe. But hey, that's just a hypothesis, a cracked out coffee and mushroom chew hypothesis. I want to thank you guys for watching, and also I want to hear what you think about this idea. This whole movie was out there, and so was the game, but given there's virtually no information besides the occasional context clue, this seems like the most logical route to me, believe it or not. Could be. So if you enjoyed, please leave a like and a comment, as the algorithm is screwing everyone lately, so it does help. I'll drop my Twitter. And if you want to know why, in May, they switched over to using AI versus the old algorithm. So the AI is just, it's doing what it does. Anyways, I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Roanoke Tales, and Instagram links down in the description. And speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the Astronaut tier, we have Army and Kusith. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the Astrophysicist tier, we have Death Dancer, Webtron Supreme, and Commander Balthael. Thank you guys as well. And at the Scientist tier, we have Some Big Nerd, Metric System, Invictus Echo, Official Texan, SSJ4 Lotus, and Gina Elaine. Thank you guys too. And the rest of my patrons, I really do appreciate y'all's support. It keeps things running around here, so it is greatly appreciated because you don't even have to do it, and you're doing it, so thank you. But all right, that's going to do it for me. Hope everyone enjoyed, and I'll see y'all in the next one.